Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody back from lunch. Thank you for being with us for our afternoon session. We're really excited to see that there are still so many participants that are hanging in for the presentations this afternoon. I'm Karen Beatty. I'm the Vice President of Science and Stewardship with the Nantucket Conservation Foundation, and I'm also on the Sandplain Grassland Network Steering Committee, and I'll be moderating the next four talks, which are a series of four 15-minute talks. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, who is Virginia Tilden. She's with the Pennsylvania Department of Military and Veteran Affairs at Fort Indiantown Gap in Pennsylvania. She's a wildlife biologist and will be presenting Just Scraping the Surface, Grassland Management at Fort Indiantown Gap and Regal Fritillary Butterfly Boot Camp. Welcome, Virginia. Thank you for being here. If you'd like to go ahead and share your screen, that would be great.
Yes, thank you for having me. You look good here?
Looks good. Can hear you well. Thank you.
Awesome. I am very excited to be part of this conference today. Often when I go to meetings in the Northeast, I feel like I have to convince the crowd that our work is as exciting as deer or forests. But I am optimistic that perceptions are shifting, especially when we are able to connect with groups like this, where we automatically feel relevant and important. So a heartfelt cheers to everyone here today, and I'll get right into it. And I look forward to any questions you might have, because I certainly will only be scraping the surface of what we do. Today, I'll discuss Fort Indiantown Gap, or I will refer to it now as FIG, the grassland management we do there, with a little extra serving of Regal Fritillary, because this rare butterfly drives many of our habitat decisions. And I will conclude with our goals of reintroducing the Regal to the Northeast. And if you would like additional information on the reintroduction site guidelines, I did drop the PDF in the chat, and it is provided to the Sandplains network as well, and will be uploaded later. FIG is consistently ranked one of the busiest National Guard training centers anywhere. The Conservation Office is tasked with supporting the military mission of boots on the ground by managing the habitat and helping keep common species common and rare species from going extinct. We have approximately 10,000 acres of shrubland or forest and 3,000 acres of open habitats such as grasslands and meadows. But I gotta let the cat out of the bag. These are not sandplains. They are anthropogenic grasslands maintained by soil disturbances from military training, fire, and other land management. But we do have a lot of overlap in management techniques and species composition, which is why we're here today. FIG has multiple reasons why they want a significant portion of their site maintained as grasslands. While military sites are required to be good stewards of the land, and these ecosystems benefit from frequent disturbances, training and hazard mitigation are top priorities. Open habitat provides line of sight for large live fire ranges and on-the-ground training opportunities. When pyro, tracers, and bombs are involved, this training inevitably will start fires. Because it is easier to reduce fuel loads in grasslands versus shrublands and forests, this significantly decreases the chance of wildfires. Frequent burning and mowing limits impacts of training, while also providing us the opportunity to manage in a prescribed fashion and promote desired vegetation. These disturbances typically occur every 1 to 3 years and support troops and highly diverse ecosystems and species, such as the proposed endangered Regal Fritillary butterfly. While there are still western regals in Indiana and west of the Mississippi, FIG is home to the only remaining population of the eastern subspecies. The regal is non-migratory and grassland endemic. They largely stay in the same fields that they emerge from, and typically only disperse in search of nectar as adults. Regals persist at FIG because the military presence and thoughtful wildlife conservation promotes the large-scale grasslands and all the essential habitat components the Regal needs to thrive throughout their life cycle. Unlike most female butterflies which lay eggs on host plants, Regals lay eggs in a sweepstakes manner, haphazardly near or on the ground. A couple weeks later, eggs hatch and caterpillars, or cats as we like to call them, eat only their eggshell and overwinter in grass clumps. In the spring, cats emerge, search out violets, and pupate in late spring. Males emerge in June, followed by females a few weeks later. Adults mate immediately, and females go into a reproductive diapause or period of inactivity during which their eggs become fertilized. The map on the left shows the 3,000 acres of open habitat at Fig. The polygon color corresponds to the Regal habitat suitability. Blue areas, called Regal Research Areas, or RRAs, total 457 acres and hold the densest populations. Potentially suitable open habitat is shown in green and has occupancy of some form, but at lower densities than RRAs. Unsuitable habitat, shown in yellow crosshatch, is either too isolated or lacking in Regal plant resources, which I will discuss on the next slide. The impact area, shown as black crosshatch, has potential open habitat shown in beigey yellow, but access is severely restricted, so no surveys are conducted in here. The map to the right shows the number of burns over 14 years. Yellow, less frequent; red, most frequent. The impact area burns annually, as do some RRAs, such as the far west end of Post, which falls under a very active military range that fires directly into the RRA. We burn Regal areas that don't fall under ranges less frequently to promote a mosaic of habitats. While most of our management is prescribed fire, we also employ other traditional methods when appropriate, and a portion of RRAs are managed via mowing or other treatments for military purposes, but seem to be benefiting the butterfly. Regal essential habitat components and their desired values come from vegetation surveys within the RRAs. These include warm season bunchgrass, violets for caterpillars, and nectar for adults. RRAs have approximately 35% coverage of little blue stem. This grass is used by all life stages for protection from the elements, and the tussock growth structure provides bare ground for violets and nectar plants to germinate. Regals are known to consume a variety of violets based on availability. Arrowleaf violets are by far the most common species at Fig, and they love bare ground and need regular disturbance. Numbers of violets decline dramatically 3 years post-burn and disappear 5 years post-burn. But if an area is burned annually, violets become patchy and less common over time. Nectar plants are vital throughout the long butterfly flight period. Each species blooms at slightly different times, has slightly different habitat needs, and reacts differently to fire and mowing. Excuse me. But like violets, if burned too frequently, numbers can decrease or even disappear. We're doing our best to adapt our methods as needed and to continue to promote the Regal through ecosystem-based management that will benefit a wide variety of grassland species. While our Regals seem to be thriving, we hope to create new populations outside of Fig through a rearing and reintroduction project. This project has evolved so much, and while we have yet to establish new populations, we are proud of our many successes. First, being our incredible advances in the rearing lab, such as overcoming the hurdles of a challenging species who can lay over 3,700 eggs each, making this the most fecund butterfly documented. A shout out to Tim and Julie at the top left, who established the rearing lab, and to Tim, who continues to work with the project, even after his retirement a few years ago. Our next success is better understanding the scale and essential requirements of partner sites, which helped us develop the site recommendation guidelines I touched on briefly. We have also fostered an incredible relationship with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, who wants to see this project succeed as much as we do, and who are doing everything to protect partner sites to reduce any regulatory impacts should the butterfly officially become endangered. And last but not least, we have brought together so many wonderful partners, the most important being Zoo America, home to our rearing lab, and the Pennsylvania Game Commission, home to our current reintroduction sites, as well as Temple University, who will be helping us execute a large grant to expand our project. Our main challenge continues to be the reintroduction site. There are not many large grassland sites in Pennsylvania, especially ones that have compatible goals, and who can convince leadership that reintroducing a proposed endangered species might not be as scary or hard as it sounds. So we have expanded the search out of state to the Northeast. Our first real conversation is with Albany Pine Bush. The goals at Albany Pine Bush have shifted recently, and FIG is ready to pursue sites out of state, so this is now a project we are both interested in exploring. In 2025, they came to see our site, we went to see their site, and we started asking the real questions and identifying the hurdles. These are primarily habitat and regulatory. We are working to examine habitat questions like opening up some shrubland acres to have more grass, better quantifying violets and nectar plants present, and exploring the resources Regals historically used on sandplains, and if these might serve as alternatives to species that might not thrive from FIG. As for the regulatory side, we had a very productive call between New York DEC, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and all relevant parties. We discussed the very real potential challenges and possible solutions regarding moving a potentially endangered butterfly into New York, where it is currently state endangered. And I'll end by stressing that eastern regals historically were found all over the Northeast, shown on the maps in orange, and many of these populations within sandplains. The last populations disappeared by the early 1990s, but think about how far we have come on our knowledge of Northeast grassland management and conservation in the last 35 years. What do we think is possible in the next 35? I'd like to advocate that there are likely other sites in the Northeast that could support regals again, and I hope you take the time to look at our partner guidelines and reach out if you would like to learn more. The regal story is intertwined with grassland conservation. While we are fighting for the future of this subspecies, the work we do is ecosystem-based and benefits a wide variety of organisms. And remember, the regal is a large and showy butterfly. It has the potential to grab public interest, stand as a flagship or poster child for conservation. I thank you for your time, attention, and consideration, and the opportunity to share our story. If you would like to see our grasslands and butterflies in person, please check out our Fort Indian Town Gap iSportsman website for our information and register for our annual public butterfly tours. And of course, many thanks to everyone listed here, including our core team, Anne, Erica, and Kaylee. This has been possible because of you and so many others. And if I have any time for questions, I can stop sharing my screen after we see this cute butterfly devouring this pasture thistle.
Thank you, Virginia. That was really fascinating. I actually recall when we did have regal fritillaries on Nantucket in the early 1990s. So love to have you consider our site for that potential reintroduction. If anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat. I don't really think we have much time for questions right now so that we can stay on track for the other 3 presentations that we have in this session. So next up is Alexandria Soldo, who is a field ecologist and entomologist at the Albany Pine Bush in Albany, New York. So great segue. Thank you, Virginia. And she is going to be talking about system-based management benefits, frosted elfin in a fire-managed pitch pine scrub oak barren. Welcome, Alexandria. If you'd like to share your screen.
Thank you.
That looks great.
Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Let me just move this over. Hi, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about how we're working to restore ecosystem health and rebuild a resilient landscape in the New York State capital of Albany, New York. And in so doing, improving habitat for multiple species of concern. In particular, I will be discussing the frosted elfin butterfly. So we'll be having another butterfly talk. If you recall Neil Gifford's talk, this slide may look familiar to you, but the Albany Pine Bush Preserve is one of the best remaining global examples of an inland pitch pine scrub oak barrens. It is also the place where Carner blue butterflies, which are New York State and federally endangered, were first described, or their type locality. Beyond the Carner blue, the pine bush supports thousands of other species. Many of these species are considered at risk, including over 74 species of greatest conservation need. For the ecosystem itself, evidence suggests that there was at one point more than 25,000 acres of the barrens that originally existed. Currently, less than 6,000 acres remain. And of those acres, many have been significantly degraded due to a combination of fire suppression, invasive species, and fragmentation. It is but one of around 20 pine barren ecosystems and one of many open canopied fire-dependent systems that support rare biodiversity like frosted elfins. This ecosystem is highly reliant on conservation to exist. I want to make a point to say that there's no reference community to really measure and guide conservation work. In the preserve, we have ecological and programmatic goals that are critically linked to rare species conservation, including frosted elfin. On the ecological side, we are concerned with ecosystem dynamics and species, but we are also concerned with programmatic goals such as supporting recreation in the preserve, education about the habitat for the public, and wildfire mitigation, as this preserve exists in a highly urban matrix. So reaching these preserve goals requires restoration and actually resetting the composition, structure, and function of a pine barrens. This often requires a pretty heavy hand with mechanical management, so clearing invasives such as black locust trees, but also thinning native forest and mowing scrub oak. However, our restoration regime does not equal our maintenance regime, so the frequency and the timing of the use of mechanical management varies significantly depending on if it's for restoration or for long-term maintenance. And beyond mechanical and chemical management, the use of fire in the system is pretty fundamental. Fire is the natural process that drives the system and the plants and animals that live in it. So it's incredibly important that we get a sufficient amount of prescribed fire on the ground. We want 10% of the preserve to be burned per year and all parts of the preserve within 10 years. Most of the barrens, as you can see in this image, have achieved a maintenance fire regime. So since 1991, we've successfully applied prescribed fire to over 4,012 acres and created and restored this heterogeneous fire-managed landscape. Note that there's not a lot of green, which means that most of the preserve has been burned fairly recently with a desired fire frequency, and the green areas are fairly full of invasive and overabundant natives and require mechanical management are burned. All of that is to say that management was essential to getting enough lupin on the landscape for Carner blues, but we've also seen other positive plant response, including New Jersey tea explosion. New Jersey tea is a shrub, fire-adapted shrub, that is the host plant for this other rare butterfly called the mottled dusky wing. We've seen pitch pine recruitment, and along with the rediscovery of plants that were initially thought to be absent from the landscape, such as Virginia marbleseed. In terms of carners, the carner response exceeded our expectations. The species was dangerously close to extirpation in Albany, with estimates below 1,000 adults from 1991 to 2011. Locally, the species is now declared recovered by state and federal agencies. That was in 2016. And we have exceeded the state and federal recovery goals for the site since, and have maintained those numbers for 12 years. So bringing it back to frosted elfins. Frosted elfins are small blue butterflies. They're in the same family as the carner blue, and similar habitat that they're associated with, remnant pine barrens and oak savannas, but they also are found in dry oak forests. So in the preserve, they share the host plant of the carner blue, which is wild lupin. They have one brood per year. They overwinter as pupa, and then they emerge in April as adults. In New York State, they are considered critically imperiled or imperiled. Globally, they're considered vulnerable, but we definitely need more population data to know for sure what their conservation status is. They may be doing worse than previously thought. In the preserve, preliminary presence-absence surveys have shown frosted elfins have consistently existed here since at least 1991. We know that they also persist long after carners have left sites because of degradation. And these casual observations suggest that their distribution and abundance is pretty high, but until now, we didn't really have any data to support that. So in 2025, this past year, we started pilot distance sampling surveys, which we do for carner blues. This is to both assist us in understanding our own population size in the preserve, and also to contribute to real conservation status data for U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So we did this at 10 of 20 of the sites that we regularly survey for carner blues. And we did this 9 times over the course of the elfin flight period, which was from April 21st to May 20th. So this map here is a map of those 20 survey sites across the preserve. The preserve extent is around 3,400 acres, and you can see that it's a fairly fragmented landscape. There's a lot of urban and suburban areas around it. The green color is the extent of our lupin. Again, lupin is important and required for both elfins and carners. The exclusively KBB surveys are seen here in blue, and then the sites that we also surveyed for frosted elfin this year are striped blue and yellow. So that's around 75 acres that were surveyed. So if you're not familiar with what distance sampling is, it's a tool that helps us accurately estimate species density and abundance by recording the distance to a detected species as one travels along a line transect. So in our case, we have 4 surveyors that go out to survey. This happens simultaneously every 2 to 3 days during the season. The surveys are highly weather dependent, so we want to do them during partly sunny to sunny clear skies, and when the max temperature is around 65 degrees Fahrenheit or above, and we don't want any winds that are over 3 meters per second. The surveyors will walk along the line transect with this long pole. It's marked with tape for these distance intervals in meters here, and the surveyors will record the butterflies at the distance interval that they're seen at. Our key assumption here with distance sampling is that all the frosted elfin that we're seeing on the line, we're seeing all the frosted elfin on the line we walk, and we're seeing proportionately fewer away from the line. So for elfins this past year, the total number of butterflies across all survey sites on each day was estimated by adjusting the collected raw counts. Our raw count this past year was around 4,827 butterflies. The collected raw counts were used for detection probability, and then we extrapolated from the actual transect lines to the entire survey area. We then fit an insect emergence curve to the estimates. So from the insect emergence curve, we get an estimate of the total number of butterflies that emerge during the flight period, or the brood size. So this figure here shows that for this past year. So we also found that not all the sites are created equally. We suspect that there's variable abundance in the variable abundance that we see is habitat driven. Fire frequency and microclimate is likely important to site level dynamics. We also see an interesting pattern in site level habitat, but we definitely need more analyses. Once we have more data, again, this has only been 1 year of sampling, more years of sampling will help us look at this in more detail. But the best sites seem to support more complicated woody structure, both overstory and understory, and abundant host plants. So lots of lupin. The less complex habitats seem to support fewer frosted elfin, with the least amount in these open grassland sites. But this is consistent with literature that seems to show that frosted elfins, although they share habitat with carners, they do kind of prefer more shady locations. So once we have sufficient annual abundance estimates, we'll look at the habitat data that we already have for a lot of these sites and prescribe fire history to better understand their population dynamics and any implications for management as we move forward. We'll also be surveying frosted elfin now at all the 20 sites. The 10 was just kind of our pilot. So we'll be doing that at all the sites that we're also surveying for carners. So in conclusion, we found that the Albany pine bush supports many more frosted elfin than we initially anticipated by manipulating plant community composition and structure. This is an important restoration strategy, but getting ecosystem processes right is essential to the population viability and climate resilience as things change in the future. Both carner and frosted elfin response, among other species that we're not directly managing for, strongly suggests that our system-based conservation has a lot of benefits. So I just also wanted to draw your attention to this photo on the left, showing one of the prescribed burns in the preserve, where you can really see how close we are to urban and suburban areas. So managing these systems, even with using fire, is possible to protect and maintain these systems, and often the rare species like frosted elfins that can be found there. So leave you off with, if we can do it here, you can do it anywhere. So thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Excuse me, that was really fascinating. We do have time for a couple of questions here in the chat. Jim would like to know, could some cardinal blue caterpillars be transported to sites in Rhode Island? There are several sizable populations of lupin here.
That is a question I would probably leave to Neil Gifford, the conservation director. Yeah.
Okay. Neil, do you want to chime in on that, or do you want to take that offline? Sure, if Neil's still with us. Moving on, we do have another question from Chris Neal. Do frosted elfins use Baptisia tinctoria on Cape Cod and Martha's Vineyard? We don't have much birdfoot, violet or other violets, but lots of yellow wild indigo.
Yeah, so frosted elfins as a whole, they seem to have two host plants, either wild lupin or yellow indigo, which is that Baptisia. But it's very population dependent. So the one here in the pine bush is only feeding on lupin, whereas in more southern populations, such as on Long Island, I believe, they only feed on the indigo. So I think it would depend what population you would be getting elfins from and what they would be feeding on in that case. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Jake McCumber comments, yes, on Cape Cod they use Baptisia. And Jennifer Selfridge says they use both in Maryland, so that confirms what you said. Thank you. I'm sure Alex would be happy to take additional questions in the chat if anyone has more. But I think we'll move on to our third talk in the interest of keeping time.
Okay.
And I'd like to thank you, Alex. That was really great. And I'd like to introduce Heather Coste, the Director of Ecological Sustainability at the Sisters of St. Joseph in Brentwood, New York. And she's going to be presenting Fire on the Ground, utilizing prescribed burns in a suburban landscape. Welcome, Heather. And if you'd
Hi,
like to
thanks for
share your
having me.
screen.
Yep, we're gonna. Is that coming through okay?
Yeah, that looks great.
Okay, great. I apologize in advance. My office is right in a very busy hallway, so if there's some additional chatter in the background, uh, there's not a lot that I can do to avoid that, unfortunately. But hi, folks. My name is Heather Costi. I work for the Sisters of St. Joseph in Brentwood, New York, and we have an ecological sustainability program. So I'm presenting here from our grounds. And just a little bit about what we do here. The Sisters of St. Joseph operate on a 200-acre campus. We kind of have a mixed mosaic of landscape here. We have our meadows, but we also have farm agricultural easement. We have open space lawns. We have a large forest easement. And of course, we have the actual sisters that live here on our campus. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the people who are involved in this. And my talk's going to be a little bit different because it's going to be coming at ways that we can steward biodiversity in a slightly different fashion. But first, I'm going to introduce you to our meadows. We do have 8 acres of meadow here. They were installed in 2 parts in 2019, 2020. And since 2024, we have been burning them in rotation. So our meadows are broken up into 3 parts, and each year our goal is to burn 1/3 of our meadow. So the first year was 2024. Next year, this year, we're also going to burn again. So this will be our 3rd year burning. All the members of my team are certified wildlands firefighters. So all of us have training in order to do this. Because we're on private property, we have some slightly different rules that we don't have to follow. We choose to follow the strictest regulations possible for the greatest safety purposes. So because we're in a suburban environment, we're not out in the wilds, we don't have other parks around us. We operate, and I'm going to show you exactly where we operate here in a minute, in a suburban setting. So we have different people that we need to take into account in addition to our wildlife and our ecological concerns. So you're going to notice that of the 6 part, 3 of them, fully half of them, are involving engagement. So because we are in such a densely populated area, we get a lot of questions, a lot of concerns, a lot of people who are just really curious about what we're doing here. So obviously, everyone here is familiar with the burn plans. I don't really need to go into the details of that sort of thing, but ours have to take into account the fact that our campus is a little different than a park. We're not a preserve, we're not a big wildlife track. We are burning 8 acres on a 200-acre campus where we have office buildings. We have a convent where the Sisters of St. Joseph live. We have a chapel. We have a preschool. We have a second language, English as second language school for women. We have a nursing home and nursing facility. So right here, right just next door to our burn area, we have over 1,000 people interacting with our campus on any given day. And that's interesting enough. Fortunately, the burn patterns itself are fairly simple. They're very straightforward. We do have large area of grass. We do have our road that surrounds our burn area. But then we put our grounds into the context of Brentwood. We are surrounded by homes. We're surrounded by businesses. We're surrounded by schools. There are at least 5 schools within a 10-block radius of where we are. There are nursing home facilities. There are businesses. There are homes. So when we're talking about our burn plan and the limitations of our burn plan, they become incredibly strict. Even for burn plans, ours are very, very strict. We have this very narrow window of wind direction and wind speed. And I'm sorry, I lost track of what I was saying. So we have very narrow confines of what we can do as far as our burn goes. So our burn plan has to take into account the fact that we are in the middle of everything here. After we do our burn plan, we have to worry about engagement. We set our burn plan, we send it out, we get our approval, but then we have to engage with the local population. That includes the sisters, it includes the schools, it includes our local neighbors. So we will put out videos. This video, I'm not going to show the video itself. Amanda Furcall, who set up this program to begin with here, introducing what's a prescribed burn, why is it happening, why is it good, and obviously, everybody here already knows that, but the average person just sees fire and sees something scary. So much of our engagement is about teaching people about prescribed burns and the benefit that they have to our landscape. It's about putting out easy to interact with iconograph style information. So this will go out in an email, it'll go out on our Facebook page, it will go out on our other social media so that people can see, oh, there's a burn coming up. What does that mean for me? What can I expect to see and why are they doing it? The burn itself, we have a very short window with which to complete the burn because we are in this densely populated area. We can't have too much smoke coming up and out. So we have to have our burn done in 45 minutes to about an hour and a half. So if conditions are not right to complete the burn in that time, we can't burn safely. But one of the things that we do in addition to the actual burn itself is also create information that's going to go out to the community as we're working. So I'm going to see if I can play this video for you guys. So we did have a drone operator come out and do a video of our burn for us, which was then cut with music to be used as an educational tool for the people that we're interacting with here around our grounds and in our neighborhood. So when we create these videos and then send them out, these are going out to a email list of over I think around 20,000 people who receive the materials that we're putting out as a department in order to help them understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, including videos like this that are meant to showcase how the burn is being conducted and that it is not something that necessarily needs to be, you don't need to be afraid of a burn like this happening uh, with professionals undertaking it. And then post-burn, we also send out and create videos, things that allow people to ask questions, allow people to interact with us as much as we can. We talk to people extensively, and we utilize the burns on our grounds as a bit of an ambassador, both for grasslands, but also for prescribed burns. And we get a lot of interactions, especially on our social media. Our communications department helps us handle these, and a lot of them are very positive. The vast majority of our interactions are people going, wow, that was really great, or that's really interesting, or it's really great to see what you're doing. And then you have people who are concerned, and we have to interact with them. We have to answer their questions. And then you have people who are upset, and they really don't want to see you burning at all because they have a limited piece of the informational pie. And so again, we considered our job to outreach and talk to these people and explain to them what we're doing, why we're doing it. At follow-up stages where we start getting back into our ecology concerns. And we have issues with woody material. A lot of our stuff doesn't die with the speed and the temperature of the burn that we have to maintain through the process. So we end up actually doing woody invasive removal by hand. We have a small enough meadow that we can manage that. So we will actually go in post-burn and do either mechanical removals or very limited cut and paint on things that we just cannot have continuing to spread in our grassland area. After the burn, we also go in and we actually will sow seeds. So sowing things like lupine, which really need that black in order to germinate, that we wouldn't be able to maintain in the grassland in other ways. And we do surveying. So we'll survey for species abundance, we'll survey for pollinators, we'll survey for different species that are coming in, things that what's coming in that we planted and what's coming in that we didn't put in. And we do try to keep track of it. This is just details from the 2024 surveying, where we went through and looked at what percentage of plants were forbs, what percentage were graminoids. Where were we seeing seedling regeneration? Post-burn, the only place we really see seedling regeneration is in our burn area, not in our other unburned as of yet meadows. And we do get to see that our cool season grasses, because we are right next to those big lawns, these prairies, these meadows were put into lawns, that the burns do help us control those cool season long grasses here. And then we come back to engagement. And it's over and over and over again when we're burning in a suburban environment about engagement. This is a group of college students, a field ecology class from St. Joseph's University that comes back every year. And they do both invertebrate and soil surveying for us as part of their program. So the students will come out, we have them, we host them, we teach them what we're doing and why, and they actually do the surveying for us, with us, to help us collect data. So we're not just going out and the four of us surveying, we're inviting another 30 people each season to help us do this surveying. And hosting events. It's very easy to look at a grassland and go, I'm not welcome there. It's not a place I can go. There's not trails, or I can't go off path because there are rare species here, which is an appropriate response. But we have a unique situation where these are constructed grasslands. We don't have to exclude people from them. And I see that I'm running short on time. So we host things like mothing events. We host, and actually that was a rare pink streak moth that we saw this past year here at our mothing event. We have children come out and we introduce them to the meadow. Every year here in our meadows, we reach hundreds of people, which is kind of the point here. And what we're doing isn't just about the ecology strictly. It is also about the outreach. It's about the ambassadorship, because going back to the very first talk, humans are part of the landscape. And we have largely excluded ourselves from that landscape. Not every single place is appropriate to have everyone, but our location here is appropriate for anyone. So it's a really great way to get that information out about what we're doing, why it's important, and hopefully somebody is going to then look at somebody else's burn or somebody else's ecology program and go, oh, I understand that. I know why it's happening and what we're doing. So just there is that quick wrap up. By opening up these lands and opening up our space to other people, by welcoming people in and inviting them to be part of that learning process, we're hopefully reaching people who will help us protect our biodiversity in the future. It may be a more indirect way of doing so, but every single person we reach gives us a chance to educate and welcome. That's it. I had to speed up there at the end, so.
Thank you, Heather. That was really interesting, and the footage was incredible to see. We do have a couple questions in the chat, but I don't think we have time to take them right now. But if you would take a peek, some questions
Absolutely.
regarding permissions and how you've handled insurance, that would be great if you could take a look at that. So
Sure thing.
thank
Thank
you
you
for
very
that
much for having me.
presentation. We appreciate it. And our final presenter for this first part of the afternoon is Sam Gilvarg, who is a PhD candidate at SUNY ESF, and he is going to be speaking on examining the effects of fire frequency on plant community structure and tick population dynamics in North Atlantic coastal ecosystems. So welcome, Sam, if you would like to share your screen.
All right, 1 second. I'm not very good at technology. All right. How's that looking?
Don't see, oh, yes. We see your presentation, but if you could put it, yeah, perfect. Thank you. You're all set to go.
Awesome. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us and me today to talk about the effects of fire frequency on plant community structure and tick population dynamics in North Atlantic coastal ecosystems. So we'll touch on sandplain grasslands as well as some pitch pine barrens in this talk. Before we begin, though, I'd like to thank the following partners and co-authors, many of whom are with us on this call today. And so the work underlying this presentation would not be possible without their substantial efforts. That includes my committee here at ESF, Brian Ledette and Martin Dovchek, as well as my major professor, Andrew Vanderyacht. Partners at Brookhaven National Laboratory, including Kathy Schwager and Tim Green, as well as Albany Pine Bush, Neil Gifford, and Alex Soldo. So just a quick perspectives about what we'll be getting into today for this presentation in case you want to follow along and see how my planning is going. So first, we're going to begin by talking about the regional tick-borne disease burden in the Sandplain Grassland region, as well as the potential effects of woody plant encroachment on tick populations, how fire affects those tick population dynamics, and we're going to sort of use research that we've been conducting in Northeast pitch pine barrens as an example of that. And finally, we're going to touch on how we can leverage these restoration to promote ecological conservation and other management objectives via something we've termed Fire Integrated One Health. And I have a quick, we have some pictures of ticks coming up. So if you're squeamish, just, close your eyes for the next 30 seconds. So ticks and tick-borne diseases in the coastal Sandplain grasslands. There are three major, main medically important for human tick species in the coastal Sandplain grasslands region. We have the Lone Star tick, which can carry pathogens that cause diseases such as ehrlichiosis and Heartland virus disease, as well as the red meat allergy called alpha-gal syndrome. There is the black-legged tick, also known as deer tick by some folks, which has pathogens that can cause diseases such as anaplasmosis, babiosis, ehrlichiosis, Lyme disease, as well as Powassan encephalitis. And there's also the dog tick, which can carry pathogens that cause diseases such as Rocky Mountain spotted fever and tularemia. And these diseases really have a significant burden on many parts, many regions that have sandplain grasslands and related ecosystems in it, including places like Long Island, as well as Martha's Vineyard. So Long Island has a whole suite of tick-borne illnesses that have varied over time in terms of detection and abundance. And there have been some outbreaks including on places like Long Island that are pretty they're pretty unusual, such as an outbreak of pneumonic tularemia, one of the only places where that's been detected, and that's traced to a tick-borne illness that affects small mammals, mowing, and then that exposes people to this pathogen that causes a pretty severe disease. And there's also a lone star tick causes alpha-gal. So this is some medical test results of me. I get bit by a lot of ticks, and I get tested positive for alpha-gal, which means that I have an allergy to beef, pork, or lamb. So if you see me, that means no hot dogs, hamburgers, or pepperoni pizza for me. But it's okay because I'm a vegetarian anyways, so no worries for that. But if you are a meat eater, that could be a concern for you. And so, why am I talking about this in a grasslands oriented conference? Well, it's because woody encroachment uh, can really have a potential significant effect on tick populations. Understanding tick physiology allows us to consider tick-borne illness within its larger ecological contexts, such as a process. And this will get us to a important place in understanding how fire management may be able to contribute to integrated pest management strategies that could potentially lower the burden posed by tick-borne illness on humans and even domestic animals and wildlife. So, what do we know? So we know that disturbance, notably fire suppression, can lead to or encourage woody plant encroachment and grassland retreats. And we also know that tick morphology, specifically their high surface area to volume ratio, means that they're intrinsically susceptible to desiccation-related mortality. What does it mean? When it gets hot and dry, ticks die. And to that effect, when they are challenged with these hostile abiotic conditions or harsh environments, they require moist and shaded refugia, such as leaf litter or duff, or the canopy layer of these woody shrubs that are in the understory. A good example of how woody species establishment can promote tick survival is through enhancing that refugia that's available to ticks, that moist refugia. One pretty well established example of this in the literature involves Japanese barberry, Berberis thunbergii, which has been documented as creating wet understories, creating refugia for ticks, and then leading to increased tick presence relative to areas that don't have this invasive shrub. And regular frequent fire can impede woody plant establishment while promoting grass and forb systems. So the theoretical upshot to this, is that the proliferation of woody plants in these grasslands, could facilitate tick survival. And the flip side of that is managing for grasslands might encourage environmental conditions that impede tick survival. And there's disease ecology replications for this, including the host ramifications of what hosts use these different ecosystems. And I'll note that some of this is need more research to unpack some of these things. We need research looking into woody plant systems versus grassland systems along that successional gradient. But to do this kind of a thought exercise and consideration, we need to conceptualize disease as an ecological process. We need to move away from thinking about disease as just something that happens to the human body, and then you get a prescription, and then you're better. A lot of these diseases have an ecological, especially tick-borne illnesses, have an ecological framing that needs to be understood to understand how fire can break this cycle. So you start off with eggs. A female tick will lay eggs, which will hatch into larvae, baby ticks. Those baby ticks will seek a small mammal, such as a mouse or a shrew, or other animals that I don't know because I'm a botanist. And they will get a blood meal on that small mammal, and they could then become infected with a pathogen that causes disease, that can cause disease in humans or wildlife. After that blood meal, baby tick will turn into a teenage tick, the well-known most angsty phase of the tick life cycle. Those teenage ticks will seek a blood meal on usually larger animals, also smaller, such as humans or deer or other larger animals. They could then change and pass along that pathogen they picked up as a child, as a larva to those new hosts. They'll change to adults after the blood meal. They can then get another host, another blood meal, which is get humans or larger animals, then potentially pass along that pathogen that can cause disease. And so when we usually talk about dealing with tick-borne disease, we usually think about dealing with these illnesses in an integrated pest management approach. So no one silver bullet, but just a whole bunch of different things that we use to decrease the morbidity, mortality, or likelihood of disease. So one thing we do is antibiotics. Oftentimes if someone gets bit by a tick, they can go on prophylactic doxycycline, or they'll go on a regimen of antibiotics if it's a bacterial infection. there's often talks about, vaccines for ticks. I know that they're working on a Lyme disease one. I actually tried to sign up for the vaccine trial, but they rejected me because I get bit by too many ticks. So that was a sad discovery on my part. We also wear proper personal protective equipment. So, wearing long pants, using chemical acaricides. And we also think about using host management. So, dealing with the hosts that can actually carry the pathogens that cause disease as reservoirs. But notice that none of these strategies have actually involved the environments, those leaves in this diagram that ticks depend on as their refugia. And that's where fire can maybe come in to be added as another element in our arsenal against ticks, as another thing to incorporate into that pest management approach. But for that, we need to understand, how does fire potentially affect tick survival? And fire can affect tick survival directly and indirectly. So fire, groundbreaking stuff here, fire is hot, and fire can, consume and kill ticks by really intense hot heating fires. So fire can directly kill ticks because of how hot it is. Fire can also indirectly kill ticks, though. By consuming that leaf litter and duff, it can deprive ticks of that refugia and cover that is needed for survival. And so by consuming this refugia, you can create conditions that when ticks recolonize an area, so just because ticks are gone from a fire doesn't mean they're not going to come back in. Deer are like tick buses. Deer will come to the burned areas because it's like, new restaurants opened up and they'll drop ticks off like at a bus stop. And so when those ticks get off the bus stop, well, they're going to find that the neighborhood is not very welcoming to them because there's no leaf litter, there's limited leaf litter, limited duff, limited cover, and so they're more susceptible to death via heating and dry conditions. But I would be wrong to say that I am the only one who's ever thought about looking at ticks and fire. There's been a lot of work done on this. And a glimpse into that literature can reveal somewhat contradictory results. So some studies suggest that fire actually promotes tick populations. Others have shown that fire really has a negligible impact on tick populations. There may be a decrease, but then it's a pretty quick, bounce back up. Other studies have shown that fire really impedes tick populations, decreases the size of tick populations, limits abundance. But when you look at all these studies from the 10,000-foot view, you start to notice that fire application in these studies was done on different spatial and temporal scales. I've been in and out of the conference today. I apologize. I've had some meetings, but some people have talked about the frequency of fire in these systems. And it really is that frequent, historical. When you look at all these studies, it's that frequent landscape scale, spatially significant studies that really cause potentially really significant decreases in tick population size, as well as the chance of encountering a tick that is infected with a pathogenic microorganism. So a tick that is infected with a pathogen that can cause disease during its next blood meal. And so whether your fire promotes ticks or impedes ticks or, tells ticks to slow down, but it really doesn't change anything, that may depend on those fire regimes that you implement. And I'd just like to quickly highlight here that we talked about Konza Prairie, the first session this morning, and some tick work actually has gone down there that looks at fire frequency and tick survival in the Konza Prairie. So it really is as amazing as we heard, and I really want to go there at some points. So myself and my collaborators have been doing some research into ticks and fire in the Pitch Pine Barrens. We were sampling for ticks via dragging at two places, Brookhaven National Laboratory on Long Island, as well as the Albany Pine Bush Preserve. And we sampled across 3 different treatments here. So a place that's burned frequently, burn that has stands that have burned infrequently, or places that have had no fire whatsoever. We are collecting ticks via dragging, so very high-tech stuff. We take a piece of cloth fabric and we drag it through the woods. And we pick up the ticks there and put them in vials, and then identify them to species, life stage, as well as sex if adults. We're recording those ambient meteorological conditions, and we're retaining ticks for future pathogen testing. Actually excited that we're working on it this semester. So hopefully, come this time, next year or in a couple months, I'll have some pathogen numbers to share with you all. We're also assessing the community structure we find these ticks in by measuring characteristics such as overstory, DBH, species ID of trees, midstory, canopy cover, species composition, and leaf litter duff depth. One presentation was talked about how we need the sandy openings in these systems, and absolutely we do. So that's a key characteristic we looked for in this research. So what are some preliminary results? And so in both Brookhaven National Laboratory this past summer, in Albany the past summer, I haven't had a chance to look over our current past summer for Albany. We saw statistically significant declines in tick abundance in the same sample size, a sample like a spatial area. We used 160 meter sampling efforts. So we found significantly decreased amount of ticks in control areas relative to areas that have burned, either frequently or infrequently at both sites. Now, one thing you'll notice is that Albany has, average of in the fired areas 6 ticks per, 160 meters, and BNL has like 50 ticks per 160 meters. One of the reasons for this, there's a lot of different reasons for that. One major one is that the common tick on Long Island is that Lone Star, which can cause alpha-gal, just a very, very robust tick. It's very, very, very survival, and compared that to deer, Lone Star, black-legged, which are very not robust. We also noticed at BNL that as time since the last fire occurred, you have more ticks returning. And so, what this kind of tells me is that, as the fire goes away, you start having more and more of that more litter that comes up. And I should say these are preliminary results, still need to be subject to more robust analysis, so don't base management decisions off these yet. Finally, we did see that in those fire areas, we have more characteristics that are associated with desirable ecological conditions. So fire from this kind of seems that fire can promote both those desirable conditions and moderate ticks, at least preliminarily. And I know I'm running low on time, so I'll go very, very quick. So can prescribe fire be a prescription for the land? And like any prescription, the dose matters. Those doses can be tied to resource objectives and the historical fire return interval. And thus, like any medication, you need to take it consistently per doctor's orders to have the effects. So if you have high blood pressure and you take your high blood pressure medication, you're going to be having a party. You stop taking your high blood pressure medication, you're going to get sick again. And so, maybe frequent fire can also promote grasslands. So can we treat for both ticks and grasslands? But, I should stress here that my research is still in process, preliminary results. We need more research on these grasslands and woody encroachment grasslands. And last slide, I swear, so I'd like to think about fire as a One Health approach. So how can we benefit both, ecosystems, animals, and people through one intervention? So, we can have fire on the ground, decrease ticks, increase cardinal blue butterflies or species richness, as well as human health. So now I know I don't have time for questions, but I'd like to do a shameless plug for a recent publication we have.
Thank you so much, Sam. That was really fascinating. And before I turn it over to Polly to moderate the discussion session, I just want to say thank you to Virginia, Alex, Heather, and Sam for those 4 really great presentations. Polly, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Sure. I will throw out the first question for Sam. Shay asked, are these results the same across all tick species? And if not, could the management of grasslands be promoting the proliferation of certain tick species?
So there is something to be said for the fact that different tick species have different habitat requirements. So some species are, much more, the largest, they're able to survive more xeric conditions. So one good example is further down south, there's a Gulf Coast tick, Emblomia maculatum. That tick's a survivor. It can survive these really, really challenging conditions. And so I wouldn't say that, so you could in a situation where you have maculatum in an area, that fire will probably have less of an effect on overall tick population size relative to, say, if you have a species like the deer black-legged tick, which is very, very susceptible to that kind of thing. Whether fire could promote specific tick species, probably a tick by tick basis. And so yeah. Does that answer that question? Sorry.
Yes. Sorry, I had muted myself. And building off of that, Sam, Steve Young, a former botanist for New York Heritage Program, asked if reducing deer abundance is more important than fire to reducing ticks. There's some comments related to that, but figured I'd throw that out to you.
Definitely to both Neil and Kathy have said, deer are only one part of the equation. So, vector-borne disease ecology is just, there's a lot of different moving parts. And so say you were able to take a magic wand and just take away all the deer on, in a given area, that probably wouldn't, do anything to Lyme disease risk, for example. I mean, there will be indirect effects because of, that's it would have effects, but the reservoir for Borrelia burgdorferi, which is the causal pathogen for Lyme disease, is not maintained in deer. Deer are poor reservoirs for that. They are maintained in the small mammals. So say you really did a whole bunch of deer management, but did nothing about the small mammals, well, you really are, that could still have an effect on disease risk because you are still taking away a large host that, tick life cycles depend on. But you may not have the same effect that you're envisioning because it's not a reservoir. Deer don't maintain Borrelia. They're a poor way of maintaining it. Conversely, there are some pathogens that are really well maintained in deer, such as the causal pathogen behind ehrlichiosis. That's very well maintained in deer, as well as other things too. So that's why we talk about these integrated pest management solutions. So it's not just about fire. I mean, fire is important, don't get me wrong, but it's also about host management. It's also about proper protective equipment. Tick checks are the most important thing. Like, no matter what, you should still be doing your tick checks. Even if you do everything else, tick checks, tick checks, tick checks.
So, thank you, Sam. And I think in this regard that, fire shifting the prominent abundance and carrier of ticks does not mean that deer are not an issue when it comes to foraging on our native plants. It's just shifting the diseases that are being spread.
You can also make the, sorry for cutting you off. You can make again, subject to, more research, deer eating the herbaceous species. Well, what is that saying for the growth of those woody species that are now, having less competitors? So, something to be said for the loss of these herbaceous species to deer browse.
Right. So I was going to switch back to the Sisters St. Joseph and Heather. I know it was addressed in some of the questions, but lobbing it back out there to you, Heather, to talk a little bit more about the permissions that you had, the sisters had to receive in order to put fire on the ground from the state, and then also the insurance requirements, because I know that is a question that many folks had related to burning on private lands.
So I'm going to half answer the last question first, in that we definitely have the insurance riders we need, but that is handled by a different team than me. That's handled by a different department. So I don't know what the specifics are on that, because that goes through a different department. Because we're not purely a land grant or a conservation. We do so many other things on the campus. Those things are handled by people who, fortunately, can take care of those details and work out. So I'm sorry that I cannot answer that question more fully on that one. The actual permissions is that we do have to go through the permitting process formally with the DEC. So every year we write a burn permit that encompasses the area that we're going to burn, about a third of our meadow, and it has to include which wind direction, the only wind direction that it can be going in, and the wind speed that it has to be, and how many staff we have to have on grounds at the time, and how many water tanks we have to have on grounds at the time, and our other requirements for informing law enforcement, hospitals, the fire department, having a fire marshal, having a burn boss. So we have to have a burn boss who has a lot more experience in running that fire than my team does. So at some point, could we have an internal burn boss? Yes, but at this time we need someone who has a lot more experience on the ground. So that's included in the permitting process. So if the DEC was ever not happy with our permit, they'd kick it back to us and we'd have to fix whatever their concerns were before we'd be allowed to burn.
And I can add that for those burning in New York State, you would look at the New York State Rules and Regulations Code 194 for burning on private lands. That would identify what requirements that you have to have in your prescribed burn plan to submit to if you're in Region 1, John Wernett, or the other regional foresters in your area. The shameless plug I can add in is that the Forest Stewards Guild, who I work for, is in the process of developing a report that will identify by each of the states in the 20-state Northeast Midwest region of the rules, requirements, and laws, and the insurances coverages that are needed in order to be burning within your state on private lands. So that will be forthcoming and be published by September and will be publicly available. So, and then Heather, I'll follow up with you on the side about the insurance, because one of the leading barriers to putting fire on the ground is the riders and the additional insurance that you need for general liability for prescribed fire. So it would be great to know if the sisters are willing to share on how you're able to obtain that insurance, because it's been one of the more challenging aspects of putting fire on the ground is getting that coverage.
Sure, and I'll see what information I can get, and you and I can talk about that later.
Okay, perfect. And was there any other questions? I'm sorry, I'm scrolling through here. I have like one more minute for questions. I know that there was a lot of great questions thrown out there about the host plants for the frosted elfin, especially on Long Island where we don't have a lot of common lupin. And related to Virginia's talk, I just want to make sure everyone has Virginia's contact information and we can follow up with her and connecting you with that information if you're interested in working with her to do some additional releases in your property. I thought that it was very noteworthy and important to identify that, you know, violets as a short-lived species of how important the regular disturbances is to keep those species within your landscape, especially as it relates to the pollinators that are critically dependent on those. So with that, thank everyone for their presentation this afternoon, especially bringing in the invertebrates into the discussions, and for Heather for bringing in a very urbanized landscape and demonstrating the success in being able to burn in a urban area that is completely surrounded by development and having many resources of concern. So we'll come back at promptly 12:35 and Kelly Ormond will be up to talk about grassland or facets of grasslands in bog restoration. So we'll see you back in a bit.
Here. So this is the final section of our Sandplain Grassland biannual conference, and really appreciate everyone sticking around. We have a series of excellent looking 15-minute talks coming up here, and we're going to start with the grasslands as a key factor or facet of cranberry bog restorations, windswept bog project. The speaker will be Kelly Ormond. We have several speakers, let's see, at least three that are part of our Sandplain Grassland steering committee, and Kelly is one of those. She's a plant research ecologist and botanist in Nantucket Conservation Foundation. So take it away, Kelly.
Okay, is everybody able to see and hear?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Looks good.
That looks good.
Thanks for the intro. So we'll be talking about the facet of cranberry bog restoration that we often don't talk about because we're usually talking about the wetland aspects of it. So this cranberry bog restoration, we're going to zoom into Nantucket, Massachusetts, which is off the southeast shore, south of Cape Cod, and the other end of the island from Sarah's talk about the pines. You can see the property outlined in red here for the windswept cranberry bog. So this cranberry bog was constructed in the early 1900s. I'm going to just briefly talk a bit about it and its history. It was purchased by NCF in 1980, and it's a fairly sizable property with a lot of different wetland cells that are here numbered on the map. And again, what we mostly talk about is restoring this, this whole facility after years and years of agriculture to a functional wetland system. But there's more to the story. The cranberry operation ceased in 2017, and we went on from there to develop a restoration project. And there was really a lot involved in this restoration project. And mainly, I'm just going to just briefly touch on the process of it. There was a lot of topographical creation inside the bogs and sand layer removal, so that we could transition this back to a wetland. We're also removing all these water control structures and also filling a lot of ditches And all of that was to get these blue arrows, which are the wetland flow through the system, but while maintaining all of these red dash lines, which are trails. So it was a pretty complex situation. We had to install some boardwalks, but we had to move a lot of soil. And where would we put that to best effect? So these are the deposition areas that we ended up having. So when we refill these ditches and we move soil around, it has to stay on property. We can't remove any. So we had a budget of material that we would be putting around this property. And we had to try to tie that in with what was existing. There were some really great scraps of Sandplain Grassland that we really wanted to expand. We also wanted to create some gradation in the landscape. So we're going to really focus in on these upland areas in between where the old bog cells were. And we really were afforded a lot of potential from these areas because these little scraps were really high diversity and high value. A lot of really disturbance dependent species had been there for a long time. And actually the mowing, the frequent mowing like a lawn during the cranberry bog operation was really not to our detriment in some ways. So like I said, mowed like a lawn. It really looked like there was nothing there, but we relaxed the mowing. And when we relaxed the mowing, you were really able to start to see all these different gradations in the topography and also in the plant communities. There were a lot of upland grasslands in the driest, highest areas. There were a lot of mesic areas of grassland. And then we had these weird seasonally wet scrapes. So we had a lot of different rare species and a lot of species that were rare for Nantucket and a lot of species that are just great habitat value. So we ended up doing a really intensive survey of this property before we did the construction, before we really even started planning it. We started working on this. And I think the species list is now around 400 species. And a lot of those are natives and a lot of rare species. So just trying to be cognizant of that when we design this whole project. So one of the things, because we're part of the Sandplain Grassland Network on Nantucket, and it's really a valuable plant community for us, we really wanted to maximize the Sandplain Grassland here at this site. And there were already these really great scraps that had some really cool rare species, a lot of sand species, dominant species that like sandy areas and disturbance, but also these weird wet pockets. So you can see the elytris on the right, the white flowers, and the yellow on the left that likes upland sandy spots. So we wanted to create some zonation in this plan, and we thought of it as kind of a sand table exercise of where we're moving the sand around and creating these contours. And we really wanted to have a lot of really dry, sandy, open expanses. I'm glad there was a shout out earlier in an earlier talk about the value of sand, because sand is so valuable to us for these habitats. This was a two-phase project. So in phase one, we were able to learn from that, what happened in phase one, and apply it to phase two. So in phase one, we had a not so great outcome that we were able to learn from, which was that when we did one of those deposition areas in the northeast part of this property, we ended up with a lot of organics mixed with clay and sand. And that came out of the bogs and from the berms. And we just didn't expect that. We expected to have a lot more sand to be able to cap this hill with. So we ended up with a hard candy coating of this material that kind of fused together. And it also really fostered a lot of non-native cool season grasses and weeds from an adjacent farm that you can see kind of in the background. So what we really were hoping for was more of an integration with these sandplain scraps. On the right here, you can see a scrap of existing vegetation that we didn't disturb. This is post phase two. So we really wanted to get this with a sand area that merges in really well topographically with what's existing and allows the Sandplain Grassland areas to expand. And we really wanted to have it capped with sand. So we had to do a little bit of a shell game of moving the sand around and actually putting sand on the surface in some areas. So these are some of the candidate species that we really wanted to see expand. The New England blazing star, the Sandplain blue-eyed grass, the little lady's tress orchid, and St. Andrew's cross, which is really regionally rare, only limited to Nantucket out of all of New England, and really mainly on the northeast part of the island, although we've found a couple of populations that are expanding its range here on island. So what we did was a lot of fencing to protect these areas temporarily. So here we've got some gradations. You can see the wet habitat to the left, mesic grassland habitat in the center, and this sandy habitat, the xeric sandplain grassland habitat at the top. So we did a lot of replanning after phase one to do this and get this in place. And I think it turned out really well. You can really see the gradation here. So why are we so important and influenced by this need for mesic grassland? Big bluestem is really rare on Nantucket. It's only at a few sites around the island, maybe a few more sites than in the past. The yellow feathergrass, the Sargassum nutans, is also pretty limited. So we wanted to really, since we had this at the property, we didn't know it until after we stopped mowing. We wanted to really let that expand in those moister areas. We also have a lot of switchgrass and little bluestem that kind of span this gradient, dry to wet. So these sandy wet areas that were in some of the depressions where soil had been compacted turned out to be some of the most interesting places. So we wanted to protect those. They were fenced and kind of grade these into the Sandplain grasslands. A lot of species like seasonally wet if they're Sandplain grasslands. So there's a lot of overlap and a lot of high diversity hotspots. So we want to keep mowing these after management with the restoration. So here you can see we've got these upland areas with the transects that we set up prior to the management for this. So you can see the bog cells with the lines and the ditches, and then those upland areas are what you want to focus on. And I'm going to show you the next year after phase one of construction. So you can see after phase one, late in the season, we had really great vegetation recovery in those areas of phase one that were outlined in blue, including the areas that we protected, staying protected, and being able to see some recruitment in those upland sandy areas around the bogs. And this drone photography is really nice because you can just step through like a time series. So we did another season of construction the following winter and spring. And the center area was constructed at that time. So during that time, more of the uplands were affected. Those deposition areas that I'd showed you earlier as blobs in red became a reality. And they really mesh in well with the existing sandplain scraps and integrating into the wetlands. So I wanted to keep this really brief. We don't have data analysis yet. I also wanted to thank the partners, the funders that helped us with this project. It's an amazing adaptive project where we really learned from phase one and put things into practice for phase two. And stay tuned for future research.
Great, Kelly, thank you very much. And we do have plenty of time for questions. I have one, too. You're getting a lot of applause there through the from the audience. Yeah, I was also going to say earlier on, you know, I think some of this idea came from some of this. I know Chris Neal is going to be speaking later. He and I have spent a lot of time around restorations, cranberry bog restorations in southeastern Massachusetts. And I think we started, and some of the rest of the group took a tour too. And we started to notice that with so much sand that's brought in for cranberry bog restorations, a lot of the Sandplain Grassland sort of associates or key species started to seed themselves in on all this excess sand. So as some of you may be wondering, like, why are we featuring a lot of cranberry bog restoration stories? But that's because all this sand is there that Jake McCumber talked about earlier as being an essential part to this. So I guess my question for you first, Kelly, is did you, I mean, it seems brilliant that you planned phase one and phase two, but was that planned in advance or was that maybe limited by?
So Karen would be a better one to speak to that in detail, but I think it was partly by design and partly by serendipity and funding restrictions and timing of the project. So getting the permitting in place in time, the first season was a little hard, so we had a later start. So we knew we couldn't complete it in one season. We also wanted to leave room for additional grant funding for the second season. I know Karen wants to chime in on that, but we were very fortunate to get this completed before things shut down for grants being released. They had already been approved and we were able to get the funding. So we were very lucky in timing too. But it did allow us to change things for phase two.
Yeah, I would agree with everything Kelly said, but an additional factor was spotted turtles at this site, and we wanted to make sure we weren't doing work at the time of the year when the turtles would have been impacted.
Yeah, Danielle
Right.
and my colleagues have done other presentations on this, and I urge people to check out our website to see the other facets of this project, because we looked at hydrology, we looked at water quality, we looked at the spotted turtles, and we looked at birds for this. This is just a micro snapshot of the plants, and especially in the uplands.
Yeah. All in all, it's a very exciting project. Is there going to be any is Nantucket Conservation Foundation leading any field trips to the site in 2026 that people might be able to join in on?
Yes, we do have a lineup on our website that's going to be coming up for the season, and our walks are now open to non-members. So if you happen to be visiting, or if you happen to be a member, check out our calendar. And we love to do walks. Also, if you happen to be a visiting scientist, get in touch.
Yeah, yeah. I've been there, and it's an amazing place. Lots of rare plants, and at least at one time, to my mind, the world's biggest population of Iris prismatica, which is just an amazing wetland edge species. It's still doing well, Kelly?
So
The iris?
with the iris was an unfortunate breaking of eggs experience, because we knew that we were going to be doing microtopography in the bogs. And there were like 4 million irises by our calculation. And those areas had to be restored to remove that sand layer and get the wetland function back. But what we do know is that those irises were the densest in areas that were heavily damaged by bog construction in the past. So it takes a few years to recover. So we did see them coming back from the bud bank and from the seed bank. So we saw good recovery. We're just not going to see 40 million of them. That was 4 million of them. That was ridiculous. It was ridiculous numbers. But we were able to protect areas with the Elytris farinosa, the colic.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks so much for the talk. I'm not seeing any questions directly about this in the chat, but so we're going to move ahead to Chris Neal, who's another member of our steering committee, and one person that's been with us from the very beginning, and he's going to talk, as I kind of hinted at, early progress in creation of sandplain grasslands within the Mattapoisett Bogs Cranberry Bog Restoration Project. So, Chris, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Thanks, Kelly, for that. This is one of 3 talks that are focused on cranberry bog restoration with this grassland view, and I'm going to talk about a Mattapoisett project. This is a collaboration between me, Pat Farrar, who talked earlier, and Sarah Quintal, who's a restoration ecologist at the Buzzards Bay Coalition. This is a Buzzards Bay Coalition owned site, one of many restorations that BBC will be doing over the next decade or so. So why are we thinking about grasslands in bogs? Well, bogs are on sandy soils, as Bob talked about and Kelly talked about. They often already have.
Chris, sorry, it's Polly. Can you just do full screen for your presentation?
It's in the window. How's that?
I think if you hit your green button, because you're on a Mac, right?
You are screen sharing. I can.
That's a little better.
Here, hold on. Let me share that. Does that help? It's still just in a window.
That's
better.
That's better. Okay. All right. So lots of these bogs these bog properties have grasslands sort of along the edges, along these gradients between bog beds and the roadways or other parts of the property. And here are just a few of these examples of what this looks like sort of before anybody goes in and does restoration. This is either actively farmed land or land that's been recently retired from farming. And there are lots of these areas within lots of different cranberry bog projects. So a few years ago, in one of the activities of the Grassland Network, at the suggestion and with some interactions of Alex Hackman, who was then the Cranberry Bog program person at the Mass Division of Ecological Restoration, he challenged us to write a white paper, and Bob alluded to this, that said, well, what would grassland restoration within these bog projects look like? And so we did that. And what's cool about this, so we gave them this white paper, and it includes just some reasons of why we want to do this and some recommendations for how you would go about it. And we handed this to DER. And the neat thing is now there a handful of these restoration projects like Windswept and like Mattapoisett, but there are several others, and there are going to be more down the road in amongst this very large number of restoration projects. And if you look at DER's list of priority projects for cranberry bog restoration, there are 20 some odd projects either done or in advanced stages of planning, permitting, or execution. But we're also looking at a landscape in which, the 13,000 acres or so of cranberry bogs in Massachusetts, and that's just the bogs, not the rest of these properties in terms of acreage. A very significant portion of that will become available for restoration as cranberry farming has just become less and less viable in Massachusetts. So this, writ large, this is a real opportunity for doing both wetland and upland restoration. And so these are actually, this is actually happening at various sites, and these are just some pictures. Kelly didn't show you this sort of stellar picture of what Windswept looked like when we were out there in September last year of one of these upland sites. These are just a couple of the other ones. So just a brief description of what we did at the Windswept property. The Mattapoisett bog property. This was bought by BBC in 2011, retired from farming that year. Restoration was designed a little bit later by Sarah Quintal at BBC and other partners. Restoration was executed a couple of years ago. One of the driving forces, as Kelly's described, is there's a lot of excavated material on these sites. The rules are, because there are old pesticide residues and other things on these sites, is that the material can't leave the site, because otherwise it would have to be tested for DDT residue and all kinds of other things. But the deal is, if you keep that on site, it's on site now, it stays on site. It doesn't trigger those additional hurdles you have to jump through. But if you have a site where it would just be too expensive to excavate, 6 feet of sand over the water table, you come up with other ways of designing a site. And a lot of times those other ways involve dry sites as well as the wetlands that you're trying to create. So those things, sort of help to make us think about building grasslands into bogs. And it sort of helps, that works together with the wetland restoration. So here's what we did at Mattapoisett. We had 20 permanent plots within the grasslands. We sampled before restoration in 2023. That's kind of what it looked like. And then we sampled those plots, permanent plots, marked, GPSed, and now permanently marked with markers, sampled in 2024 and 2025 after restoration. So we have 2 years of plot data after restoration. In this design, Sarah's brainchild was that there were 10 plots that got a grass seed mix. We knew from other past experiences that putting seed on these sites was an important precursor to getting the results you want. The question was, do you go the extra mile and put grass seed as well as a more expensive and pricey, forb seed mix, or do you go with a grass seed mix alone? So 10 plots got grass seed, 10 plots got grass plus forb mix, and we followed both of those treatments over time. We like these 3x3 meter quadrats. You're going to hear Francesca next talk about comparisons of these different methods. But we lay out these 3x3 meter quadrats at pre-selected randomized points. We record all the species and we record cover in different categories. And then we can plot over time the species richness and also the abundance as cover as a measure of abundance in these sites. Right. All right. So here's some results. What this shows is on the left, the grass and forb treatment. On the right, just the grass only treatment. 2023 is before restoration, before that dotted line. And this is simply the result we get in every wetland site in cranberry bogs. But we were very encouraged that you get a big bump up in species richness, overall species richness. Now, this is sort of 20-something to plots, 20-something species per 3 by 3 meter plot, which is a fairly nice plant abundance, a density of plant species. And you don't get a big response of non-native species. The vast majority of species that come in are native species. And this is, we knew this for the wetlands. We had done quite a bit of work previously on plant responses to the wetland portions of the restoration of these cranberry bog sites, but not the uplands. We were concerned that there would be non-native species, sort of weedy species, colonizing these drier areas. So fortunately, we didn't see very much of that. And so that was encouraging. If you just look at the top 10 species, this is just to show you sort of what these communities look like. There were already plants that we would, before the restoration, like coming in on that old bog surface where the water table was a couple meters down. We already saw what you would classify as sort of characteristic sandplain species, Euthymia caroliniana, different goldenrods, Panicum virgatum, little blue stem, and then other sort of more common and ubiquitous species like Rubus flagellaris, dewberry, and greenbrier, and those are common across retired bogs. So if you go, after 1 year, the more of the upland grasses are coming in. The Euthymia was still there, even though everything got dug up. We got sort of some wetland species. Some species characteristic of these just bare sandy areas, some blue stem coming in. A lot of this Viola lanceolata, that's really a species that responds to the wetland restoration. We see it everywhere in almost every bog project. And then as you go, another year, you get lots of species we see. Some of these are wetland species. We don't expect them to persist. We often see these take a couple of years to come into bog projects. So there's still some sorting out to do, but this is the cover is dominated by this upland grass species that we think of as characteristic of Sandplain grasslands, plus some of these wetland species that germinated, but I don't think will persist at that site. The question of whether the grass and forb seed made much of a difference, not in terms of total plant cover and not in terms of the sort of native or non-native species mix. The response in these plots was almost identical. But this is the total cover. But if you look at the cover of some of the grasses that sort of target foundational grasses to Sandplain grassland habitats, you see switchgrass and little blue stem, coming in very nicely to these sites. Of course, after 1 year, it's a lot of bare ground, but after 2 years, both are increasing in these sites. And then finally, if you look at forbs and whether the seeding of forbs made a difference, I think the answer is yes. While there's not a big difference in the yellow line here, the graminoid cover between grass and forb or grass only, there is this bump here. I think I have it highlighted. This bump in forb cover, and as Pat alluded to earlier, forbs don't make up a really large percentage of the cover of these systems, but a very large proportion of the plant diversity. So working on getting those forbs in there, with some effort and some cost, obviously, of putting seed mixes, and it raises another question of like, what is the seed mix and where does it come from? And those are questions that the network is also trying to tackle. But I think this is an early result. We want to follow this over some more years, but an encouraging result. So what do we conclude from this? Just a couple of years of following these plots, Sandplain grassland is well on its way to being established. High proportion of native species, low cover of non-natives, more sorting out of species to come, probably losses of wetland species. That's expected and fine. Forb seed mix led to more forb cover by year 2. And what I think is really cool, and Kelly showed a great picture, and I've got my own picture of this. The neat thing about having these grassland pieces, habitats in the bogs, is you can make gradients such as this. Same exact thing, that this could have been a windswept picture, but it's a Mattapoisett picture where you've got on the right-hand side, you've got sort of pickerel weed and an emergent, almost permanently flooded zone that's going to support wetland plants most of the time. But then you've got this zone where you, in your wet years, that intermediately flooded zone will move upslope, and in dry years, the grassland will move downslope, and you'll get this dynamic habitat that can support, that will adapt to whatever the future climate throws at us. And these sites, I think, done well, can really be adaptive and resilient over time. And the grassland versus the wetland won't be in the same place every year, but those habitats will be there within the same system. And I think that's what, when we sat down and Bob and Kelly and I and Karen, we put together this white paper. That's what we were aiming for. And I find it very, very rewarding to see that executed on the ground, with the potential for that to expand and be executed in lots more places, because the early results, I think, are very, very promising. So thank you very much. I'm going to just leave it there.
Great. That was really nice, Chris. I think the biggest question, which we do have about a minute for, is where do the seeds, what are the seed sources, if there's more than one, and how did you decide on that?
That's a question for Sarah Quintal. I don't know exactly where the seeds came from. She commercially sourced them. But I know it's been a challenge, because BBC has been doing different kinds of restorations, marsh restorations, other bog restorations, and finding the seed source that's appropriate and what, when you need it is a big challenge. I don't know, Sarah on? I know she was going to join us for a little bit. If she's on, she could put something in there. She could answer that question more clearly than I can.
Are you still on, Sarah? I saw you were on in the morning. Let's see. I don't know if you can even unmute if you are on. But I know Sarah and I were in touch about various seed questions over time. So she was making a very concerted effort to try to keep the sourcing as locally as possible, and also to avoid some problem species that may have cropped up. So Sarah's, she's part of the Buzzard Bay Coalition. She's like the chief ecologist there, or at least I think of her that way. That may be her title. And so if you look up the Buzzards Bay Coalition or Save Buzzards Bay, you can certainly find her contact information there, and we'll get more answers to that question, because I know a lot of people are wondering about that, and it's been a question in the Northeast for quite a while. Polly Wigand also knows quite a bit about that, at least from the Long Island standpoint. But we're going to leave that aside for now. But thank you again, Chris. It was a really nice bunch of pictures and good talk, and it leads very well into our next talk by Francisca Lopresti. And just by short introduction, just as a lot of us are thinking about seed sources and things for restoration, really a lot of us have talked over time about how to survey and implement monitoring of these systems, either before or after. It's a constant question, and something that is often neglected. So we're going to get some interesting information on that right now from Francesca Lopresti. So the title of her talk is Comparison Point Intercepts versus Quadrats for Quantifying Grassland-like Vegetation. So welcome, Francesca.
Thanks, Robert. Okay. Hello, my name is Francesca Lopresti. I am currently a postbac with the ACES Fellowship through the Sea Education Association. Through this fellowship, I've been working at the Woodville Climate Research Center with Dr. Chris Neal and Pat Farrar, and the study I'm presenting today was only possible because of the work from Kelly Omand at the Nantucket Conservation Foundation. Like Robert said,
you could just, Francesca, if you could just speak up a tiny bit. You're a little bit softer than previous speakers.
Okay, sounds good. Today I'll be presenting on the comparison of point intercept versus quadrat-based methods for quantifying grassland-like vegetation. Is that good, Robert?
Better. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
better.
Great. To begin, We should know that plant species richness is a vital metric for understanding the progress of restoration and vegetation response. The tricky part is that in some of these restored areas, there is a high biodiversity that is highly volatile as a plant community undergoes natural successional pathways. As such, it's crucial that we are critical of the existing vegetative surveying techniques so that we can optimize effectiveness and efficiency. In this study, we compared two well-established and often used methods for vegetative surveys: the point-intercept transect method, henceforth referred to as the point-intercept method, and the quadrat-based method. Next slide, Polly. Thank you. In this study, we compared, the point-intercept method is conducted by laying down a transect of a specified length and assigning markers at an even interval along that transect. And then a dowel is placed at each of these markers, and any plant that is making contact with the dowel is identified and recorded as a hit. The raw cover is then quantitatively determined by the sum of the hits for each of that species. Next slide. The quadrat-based method takes a frame usually made of PVC pipe of a set dimension and randomly distributes that frame around the site. Then carefully treading around the edges before going into the frame itself, every species within the frame is identified and recorded. After, the cover is determined qualitatively by visually estimating the cover of each species on a scale of 1 to 8, with 1 being less than 1% cover and 8 being 76 to 100% cover. Next slide. This study was conducted on the island of Nantucket, like Kelly was saying, at the recently restored windswept bogs. Pictured here is the site before restoration, and next slide. And then this is a picture of the site after restoration. This study was conducted over both restoration phases so that we could compare the method efficacy throughout the restoration phases. And then when you're ready, next slide, Polly. Thanks. Okay. At Windswept Bogs, there's been a long-standing partnership between the Woodville Climate Research Center and the Nantucket Conservation Foundation, or NCF. At NCF, a number of transects have been established in order to conduct vegetation surveys using the point-intercept method. Pictured here in yellow are 8 of the transects that the Woodville Climate Research Center used to overlap the two methods. So next slide, Polly, please. So go back one more. Thanks. So pictured here in the blue squares are the quadrats that Woodwell used to use a quadrat-based method. There's 5 quadrats on each transect for a total of 40 quadrats total along the site. Okay, next slide. Thanks. So in comparing these two methods, we're trying to understand how each of these methods relate in terms of giving a comprehensive picture of species richness and abundance in diverse, low-growing, and herbaceous areas. Throughout this comparison, we paid special attention to observances of rare species, the accuracy of cover estimates, and the effort expended on either method. Analyses for the study included looking at differences between total site species richness and the average species richness per transect between the two methods, differences in life form distribution, average cover linear comparisons, consideration of discrepancies in effort expended on either method, and lastly, how the size of the quadrat and the quadrat-based method might impact the results of this comparison. Okay, next. So to get into the results, for the point-intercept method, the pre-restoration found 16.1 observances on average of unique species per transect and 17.4 post-restoration, and the quadrat-based method found 33 species on average per transect, pre-restoration, and post-restoration 41.9. And then total over the whole site, pre-restoration, the point-intercept method found 43 species, whilst post-restoration found 45. And then the quadrat-based method found 74 pre-restoration and 88 post-restoration. Not featured here, we also looked at each of the individual transects, and every single transect reported a higher number of unique species when using a quadrat-based method versus the point-intercept method, which naturally made us think, okay, this is what you get when you have 5 quadrats on one transect, but how would this change with different amounts of quadrats overlaid on a single transect? When would the species richness found by the point-intercept method be comparable to the quadrat-based method? And what we found was before restoration, transects with 5, 4, 3 and 2 quadrats per transect each have a higher species richness, featuring a typical sigmoidal curve that evens out around 5 plots. It isn't until you are limited to just 1 quadrat per transect that you see any overlap in species richness amount, which we will come back to later in the presentation, so try to remember that. Next slide, please. Okay. In post-restoration, when there is higher species richness all around, the quadrat-based method now consistently reports higher species richness than the point-intercept method, although the species richness with 1 quadrat per transect is comparable to the amount found using the point-intercept. Okay, next slide. Thank you, Polly. We then sorted the species into 3 groups, overlapping, which means that we found the species in both methods, and then species unique to quadrat-based method, we only found it using the quadrat-based method, and then species unique to the point-intercept method. We see that pre-restoration, there's a largely uniform spread, with most of the species being observed by both methods, but then post-restoration, this shifts. Now, the quadrat-based method finds the majority of the species, and when looking at the average cover of the species identified in these 3 categories, next slide, please. We see that the species that are found by both methods in overlapping have a much higher mean cover than the species found by just one method during both pre and post-restoration. It is important to note that post-restoration, there's a pronounced increase in mean cover for the species observed just by the point-intercept method, while the mean cover for species found by only the quadrat-based method remains quite low. This suggests that both methods adequately record dominant species, while the quadrat-based method records larger numbers of low-cover species. This led us to consider the types of species that each method was identifying by grouping our data into life forms. Next slide, please. So specifically, we grouped them into 3 categories: graminoids, pictured here in blue, forbs, pictured here in red, and woody species in yellow. We wanted to answer the question, what sort of picture do you get of a grassland landscape if you were to only use one method or the other? Would they be drastically different? And what you can see here is that pre-restoration, both methods record evenly distributed life forms. Post-restoration, both methods record an increase in the percentage of forbs, but the point-intercept method also finds a percentage increase in graminoids identified. Next slide, please. Our next analysis used a linear comparison to gain insight onto possible disparities between the 2 methods between how the 2 quantified cover to measure species abundance. As you can see here, on average, the point-intercept method found 1.6 times higher cover than the quadrat-based method. When looking at the most dominant species found using the point-intercept method, we notice that there is a blend of woody, graminoid, and forb species. The top 5 species are, next slide, Polly, and then another slide. Vaccinium macrocarpon, next slide. Panicum virgatum, next slide. Scirpus cyperinus, next slide. Philipterus palustris, and then last slide, Toxicodendron radicans. Next slide, please. When looking at the post-restoration cover distribution, you see an increase in this disparity in the quantifications of cover between the 2 methods. Now, post-restoration, we notice that the point-intercept method found 2.4 times higher cover than the quadrat-based method, and the 4 species with the highest cover are all graminoids. Next slide. One more slide. Juncus canadensis, Juncus effusus, Scirpus cyperinus, and then Eliocharis elliptica. It should be noted that these disparities in cover is likely from an underestimation of the visual estimation method that the quadrat-based method utilizes, rather than an overestimation on the part of the point-intercept method, which uses an algorithmic approach to quantifying cover based off of hits, with the dowel along the transect. Next slide. Thank you. Okay. Another thing to consider is the total effort expended on either method. As seen previously in this analysis, roughly the same amount of information is gathered with 1 quadrat per transect using the quadrat-based method as it is looking at 1 transect using the point-intercept method. Based off of the 2025 sampling season, roughly 5 to 6 transects using the point-intercept method could be completed per day, while 15 to 20 quadrats could be completed in a similar time frame. So if collecting the same level of species richness, the quadrat-based method can be completed around 3 times faster. But if you're trying to get an increased number of species richness and a broader picture of the lower cover species, then 5 quadrats per transect will do just that, but it will require a little bit more time and effort. Okay, next slide, please. All right, lastly, in NCF's original experimental layout, the point-intercept method was hybridized with the quadrat-based method, meaning that along the 50-meter transect that the point-intercept method was conducted on, NCF also randomly placed 2 1-meter by 1-meter frames, which is considerably smaller than the 3-meter by 3-meter frames that Woodwell used, along that transect. The species richness found in those quadrats was combined with the species richness that was reported by the point-intercept method. What this table here shows is that while the larger quadrats, 3 meters by 3 meters, still find a higher total and mean species richness, the total species richness is more comparable between quadrat size than between the 2 methods. While a more convoluted comparison, since the quadrats were not nested, this may signify that using the quadrat-based method in tandem with the point-intercept method may contribute to a more thorough picture of the species richness of vegetation response than strictly point-intercept methods or surveys. Last slide. So to wrap up, the purpose of this method comparison was to identify strengths and weaknesses between 2 commonly used vegetative surveying methods. Plant species diversity is a crucial aspect of monitoring habitat restoration, and our study shows that while a quadrat-based method gathers a more comprehensive picture of the diversity of species, including low-cover species, both before and after restoration, it potentially underestimates the amount of cover of each species. Point-intercept methods tend to find a much higher amount of cover species, but do not find the same amount of unique species. Given that a quadrat-based approach finds roughly 3 times the amount of information than the point-intercept method in a similar time frame, the quadrat-based method should be seriously considered when investigating vegetative response to habitat restoration. Next slide. Okay, and then just to wrap up, we want to say thank you to Anastasia Pulak, Sarah Kleonsky, Jennifer Carberg, Ashley Terry, Spencer Kimball, and all the other NCF interns that worked tirelessly to gather all of this data. Thank you so much.
Wow. Yeah, getting some applause coming in from the audience. That was fascinating. It went by so fast. And great to see these 3 talks right in a row. Some of each one having at least a little bit to do with windswept bog. I didn't see questions pop up directly in the chat, but I have one. And this is kind of maybe an odd question, but in point intercepts, can a surveyor keep standing up the whole time? And in the quadrats, do they get down on their knees?
Well, I wasn't doing the point-intercept method, so maybe Kelly can speak to that. But when I was spying on Spencer and Ashley, they were standing the whole time. Whereas when I was with Chris in the field doing quadrat, we were usually standing, but there was definitely some kneeling and digging around.
Yeah. So for Chris Neal, there could be another data point to collect in the future. I know when I've done similar work, you find a lot more stuff when you're kneeling beside a quadrat. I think Kelly's going to comment here.
Yeah, I definitely think it varies per person how much bending over. I always try to get right to the bottom of things by getting down there. But a lot of people are terrified of the poison ivy at the bog, and that was one of your dominant species, and for good reason. It came out in the data that way.
Yeah. There have been some, we've digging around for this, but just to comment here, there are some papers, it turns out, and I didn't know this going in, but as we were looking at it, people have looked at sort of how long a person spends at a plot is related to how many species they find there. And I'm sure that varies by individual, but if the more time you spend, the more of those little tiny plants that you find in there. So there's, we haven't put a lot of effort into sort of standardizing the time we spend at a plot. We usually have, 1 or 2 people, experienced people at a plot, but there's, and you're recording cover in categories, and then you're taking the cover as you're changing a range to the midpoint of that range when you do any analysis of total percent cover. So you're further influencing the cover value that you get by that approach. But it's, seems to be accepted, and we've published a lot of papers using these sort of quadrat-based techniques. But it does raise the question of whether we as a network should be pushing for any kind of standardized methods for looking at some of these things. I've been a proponent of quadrats and larger quadrats rather than 1 meter because we really care about those less common species. And anyway, that's more food for discussion.
Quick comment on that we put out a protocol, and this method that we used in the wetlands with the transects and the 1 meter quadrats, that was actually part of the Sandplain Grassland Network's decided upon scheme for sampling across different Sandplain grasslands in different places. So it's definitely worth a revisit. I always question whether people would be able to see in a large quadrat. So I'm curious to snoop around and watch Chris do this the next time he does.
Yeah. And there are ways of doing a nesting. We should do more of that work perhaps. And we actually proposed that on the vineyard we did some 1x1 and 3x3 comparisons. It's tricky because it's hard to compare.
Yeah. We're going a little over, but we can bleed into the final discussion and closing remarks. So we won't panic over this. There's a lot of interesting comments. Steve Young said he's seen people build platforms for quadrats so you can stand up. That sounds interesting. Chris Graham says kneeling versus standing depends on the quality of your back. Good point. I know Sarah Kleonsky weighed in that she says 15 to 20 quadrats of a day is a lot, depending on the number of people. And she's done hundreds of them. So this is now bringing up a lot of questions, and we should devote maybe in the next conference or some method, some way, some future conference of any kind, a little bit more to monitoring, because there are a lot of questions here. But I see Adrian on the screen is ready to go, and we're going to continue the theme of cranberry bogs, and we're also going to pull back in the theme discussed earlier by Heather Costi of community connection and community interaction. And so this sounds like a talk that'll be really interesting here. Living Observatories efforts. Have you got your screen up, Adrian?
Yeah, I can.
Go ahead and pop your screen up there. Living Observatory efforts to create a community of people working on bog restoration and a clearinghouse for bog restoration data presented by Adrian Wiegman. So thank you, Adrian.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. I'm really glad to be following up these talks because it gets some of the background information out of the way. And also I've been able to present some material to tell you about, I've got some slide timings here. I've been able to present some material to talk about the Mattapoisett project and the Windswept project. And one of the things that we're really focused on at Living Observatory is developing technology to monitor the arc of change at restoration sites. So the discussion in the talk before about point versus quadrats directly ties into what we hope to encourage, which is scalable monitoring systems. So Living Observatory is a 501c nonprofit, and we are a learning collaborative that supports community and science for wetland restoration on cranberry farms. We have a web platform that I'll be talking about today, some of the features and how some of the projects we've discussed today integrate with the platform. But projects are really at the center of our community and the platform that has developed to support that community. So Living Observatory started during the planning of the Tidmarsh project, which was the second cranberry bog restoration in Massachusetts and a DER priority project. So for those who don't know, DER is the Division of Ecological Restoration in Massachusetts. And so Living Observatory was established at a time when cranberry bog restoration was a new concept. And the organization was a smaller community. Their activities included site walks, roundtable summits, but also some detailed and cutting-edge development of sensor networks, led out by our current technology director, Brian Mayton, who did his MIT Media Lab PhD thesis on sensor networks. So out of those early years came a report on learning from the restoration of cranberry farmland. And this is just a great document that serves as a good entry point for anyone new coming in from different backgrounds to learn about cranberry farming as well as their restoration. It was one of the first things that I read when I started working on cranberry bogs years back. So in 2021, Brian Mayton developed and released a community platform that could connect the data and people and projects and places where all this work was being done. But also the platform was built to fix a key issue that he dealt with during his PhD, which was that the data is disconnected. You go to the field, you put out an instrument, you write some notes in your notebook, you troubleshoot it, you take some pictures on your phone or where have you. This sensor network is storing data somewhere in Cambridge, and all these details are in separate places. So what the platform has been designed to do is consolidate that information and tell the story behind the data by those who collected it. So currently, we are supporting a larger community as the number of cranberry bog restorations have grown over time, and there's going to be more and more in the future. So now the platform is able to cover multiple projects and sites. We're constantly curating the public data archive that is represented on this platform, including pages that describe what went on at the Mattapoisett Bogs restoration and what went on at Windswept, as well as supporting regional monitoring data, including the data sets of vegetation surveys done by Chris Neal's group. So now I'm going to kind of enter a show and tell portion of the platform and integrate it into some of the talks that you've heard earlier today. So this is a image of the properties represented on the platform or sites. And so the spatial coverage of this platform is essentially the area where cranberry farming is occurred in Massachusetts and Southeast Massachusetts. So here we have a pop out where we see Mattapoisett bogs. And sorry, I have some timings that are going off. And if we look over here, we click on that, you get to see a screen that shows the property boundary, who owns it. You can click and get a little QR code that may have use in various applications. But you can also see that there's study plots here. And so if you click on a study plot, it will show you what kind of monitoring is going on there. So there's soil monitoring going on here. There's vegetation monitoring going on here. It's located within the Mattapoisett Bogs property and various other metadata about the site at the time the plot was established. These plots are also linked to properties. These plots are also linked to projects. So if we zoom in here, we can see that there's a project on vegetation trajectories in retired cranberry bogs. And this is the project maintained by Chris Neal and Pat Farrar and their colleagues. And we're building out features to support data sharing. So right here, there's a data tab on the project homepage, and you can export these data with the plot names and the counties and the GPS coordinates and other various metadata and export those records. So if you're a researcher and you want to know, I have this question, I want to know where this extra supplemental data is, where could I put a soil plot, or where could I study and look for invertebrates? This could be really useful, as well as keeping a record of what monitoring is occurring in the state, and so forth. So if we look at the Mattapoisett Bogs project page, this page represents the wetland restoration project that occurred at Mattapoisett Bogs. So for a restoration project or for a land management project, a project page will typically have information put forth by the landowners or project managers describing the property, the goals of the project, who were the funders, who were the partners, what were some of the design interventions or stressors that were alleviated, and so forth. And these pages can host files as well. So this is an example of a map of the water control structures that were in place at Mattapoisett Bogs before restoration. So, we may want to update some of these pages with presentations that occurred today, and we can build out the records there. So it's good for sharing publicly or privately within the project owners some of the key files that information that researchers or other managers would want to be able to distribute. A new feature that we've been trialing in 2025 and now more this year is a feature called Insights. So this is a portion of the website that acts a little bit like a social media page or feed, where users can post insights that can be tagged with free-form text as well as locations. And they come with a title and then a body, and there can be responses as well. So this image here is showing insights that occurred at the windswept bog that were tagged with windswept bog. So some of these insights were insights that we helped to record when we went on a tour of windswept farms or the restoration site this summer, led by Karen Beatty and Kelly Omond and the engineering team as well as the construction team. And so they spoke about some of the challenges of the phased construction, et cetera. And so here we have an insight where they're saving some ditches with native wetland plants. So Kelly and her team were able to identify that there were native plants with some rare species in them. And so they worked with the engineering team to exclude those from being filled in to for the hydrologic restoration portion. So one of the lessons we're learning here is that there are trade-offs between designing restorations for plants and wildlife and water, but we're learning how to navigate those, and we're tracking that with some of the insights that are coming up here. So here's an example of knowledge transfer or the change in use of materials over time. So one of the biggest costs associated with a wetland restoration project in a cranberry bog is earth moving materials. There's up to a meter of sand on these cranberry beds that in some cases all of it needs to be removed or broken up somehow. So any way you can reduce the material moving saves on costs. So at Tidmarsh, here's a picture of an earthen berm that had been removed in order to get at some of these water control structures, and that this material was then moved directly to an adjacent location to fill in the ditch. Now, if we fast forward to windswept, you saw the talk earlier where NCF and the engineering team came up with an idea to build in depositional areas that would serve as grassland habitat. And during that phased approach, they were able to find that, well, if you just simply deposit the material, you'll get one kind of result. But if you add 1 foot layer over top, then you get a successful reestablishment of the grassland community. So this is the kind of information that we really want to be tracking using this insights tool. We continue to develop and test the platform for field research and collaboration. This past year, Living Observatory runs a Atlantic white cedar nursery, and we conducted a trial planting of Atlantic white cedars and collaborated with Chris Neal and Pat Farrar and got their support to help establish some planting plots using their 3x3 quadrats, where we would plant these young seedlings and then monitor their survival over time. So as we were doing this, I was the scientist on the ground trying to work with the platform, and I'm uploading data sheets. I'm putting in updates of, we installed soil moisture sensors today. Here's a site map. And so what I get out of it is, normally this information might sit on my desk for a year before I do anything with it, or I wait till the next talk comes up. But with the platform, I'm able to put this information up so that if anyone has a question in the meeting time, at least they know I'm working on it. And I can start sharing the practical advice before any publications might occur. So
we got about 1 more minute, Adrian.
Okay, yeah. So I think the point is, when information is easier to record and share, the documentation can become more thorough. You can reflect more frequently, and then hopefully that makes practice more effective. So the platform's got a bunch of great features. It helps to connect people. It credits organizations for their work. We're building a growing record of georeferenced biophysical data. We're excited about this insights tool and looking to see how that can translate to other settings. In practice, the public sees who does what work and where. Managers and practitioners are able to share their sites, their goals, activities. Researchers are able to share their study questions and methods. So if we're able to connect practitioners and researchers, I think that can lead to more effective questions and also more effective designs. So I'm happy to take any questions and curious to see how our work could link in with the Grasslands Network.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Adrian. That was wonderful. And people can find out a lot more on livingobservatory.org, which I know I've explored in the past, and it's quite a remarkable website. You think, how on earth are they doing all these things? But we need to wrap up by moving on ahead to Polly's talk. So Polly's, okay, she's starting to get her screen up. Polly's been a very important part of our steering committee, our one Long Island representative, and she's been doing a lot of great work with fire. So this is a good way to wrap up. I've seen some of the amazing videos that Polly's put out for some of the firework in southern Maine. So maybe she'll talk about a little bit about that. But the title of her talk is North Atlantic Fire Science Exchange. And by the way, Eric is on helping to run this whole thing from the Fire Science Exchange. So we really want to thank him for really being the backbone of the technology platform. Thank him and the Fire Science Exchange for helping to collaborate with us here. So the title is Helping Connect Fire Science to Land Management in the North Atlantic with Polly Wigand. So thanks, Polly. Take it away.
Are you seeing my extended view, Bob, or are you seeing, is the last presentation going to be the one that gives me the technology challenges?
We're seeing your, we're not seeing your presenter view.
Of course you're not. Okay, stand by. Let me try this one more time.
We can see the PowerPoint.
It's not giving me the option. Hold on. Aren't I lucky?
Start slideshow.
I don't know why it's doing this.
Yeah, and while there's this slight pause here, we'll mention that the post-event survey is up in the chat, and it's the link in the chat is the one we'd really like people to fill out, so we can get some feedback on this today's event. Like Polly's still working on bringing up her PowerPoint.
Yes, I am.
Adrian, your video is still on. I'm not sure if you want that.
Oh.
Polly, if you can't do it, just do it from that view you had, because we can see the slides perfectly well.
Good idea, Chris.
All right, here we are.
It does say double click to enter full screen mode. I don't know if that would work.
How's that?
We're
good
see
now, right?
Yeah, that looks good.
Well, I didn't want to end our day without some sort of technology challenge. So, okay. So for those that don't know me, and those that do and wonder where I'm working now, is that I currently am serving as the Northeast Fire Projects Manager for the Forest Stewards Guild, where I've been working for almost 2 years now. And one of my main responsibilities in this position is to help co-lead the North Atlantic Fire Science Exchange. So I wanted to take a little opportunity to showcase what this entity does, this organization and program, and entice you to sign up for our mailing list so that we can further help you connect fire science to management in protecting and preserving Sandplain Grasslands and other natural resources and ecosystems in the Northeast. So, if I can only advance my own slides here. Okay. So the NAFSE leadership, we're funded through a federal grant that comes through the U.S. Forest Service Northern Research Station. And Michael Gallagher, who some of you may know, that works at a Silas Little Research Station in New Jersey, is our principal investigator. And then Erin Lane, who is with the USDA Climate Hub Director. She is also with the Forest Service and the Northern Research Station. She is the founder of NAFSE and continues to be our assistant director. And then, as Bob highlighted and gave credit to, the man behind the curtain, if you will, Eric Evanson, is my associate, and he heads up all the science communication, posting all the social media, the newsletters, and helping to coordinate the workshops alongside me. My primary responsibility is coordinating the workshops and publishing the research briefs and other responsibilities on the admin side of what NAFSE does. So as I mentioned, we are a federally funded program that comes through the Forest Stewards Guild and the Northeast Forest Fire Protection Compact. And the funding comes through the Joint Fire Science Exchange Program. This federal program then allocates funding to each of the exchanges. There's 16 of them across the United States that helps to disseminate advancing research and connect that to land managers related to fire science. And so it could be anything from directly related to fire science to active management and information to help better advanced putting fire on the ground. And so that's where the connection with southern pine beetle and the floristic studies related to the Sandplain Grassland Network come in, for example. And so this map here shows the reach of NAFSE down into Maryland, up through New Jersey, through central Pennsylvania, and up through New York. The lake states and us tend to overlap in our coverage with the core of New York. So if you're interested in participating or getting the Flash Friday e-news from the Greater Joint Fire Science Exchange, they do have federal funding that's available to help support early career professionals in research that's available, as well as helping to support research studies that we will help disseminate, but you could get that information first from them by joining that website. We are collaboratively hosting the last of our Fueling Collaboration Series 6 with the Eastern networks, and the next event that we're hosting is Reframing the Ecology of Fire in Northeastern United States, quote unquote, the old growth forest ecosystems. And so if you click on this QR code, that will take you to the page for registering. We offer this Fueling Collaboration Series as a panel discussion rather than as presentations focused on advancing research, the hot topics of the year. And we hosted the first grassland focused fueling distinct prescriptions for eastern grasslands back in November. So if you missed that and you're interested in seeing that, that is posted on the NAFSE website. Eric will be hosting this Hot, Dry, and Windy Index webinar that helps to further refine your prescriptions related to putting fire on the ground, related to on-the-ground actual weather and weather projections in our climate. And that'll be hosted on the 25th. The QR code is up here, and that is also available on our website. We help support students, so those that are helping to support fire-related research. We welcome submissions from students to help support their experience and knowledge in giving these presentations related to their research. And we host those every spring and fall, and our next student webinar series starts in March. They occur on each Thursday through the month of March. So we are always looking for students to support that student webinar series. So please feel free to reach out to us if you have students or are a student and are interested. The Northeast Midwest Prescribed Fire Science and Management Workshop has been hosted now for the last 3 years. This is on the banner, the event from last year that was hosted on July 8th through the 10th. And it will be hosted again this summer through virtual presentations and in-person field trips. So this is one of the events that NAFSE, along with our other cooperative members, including the Albany Pine Bush, help to host within our region for the 20-state area. And the last thing I wanted to highlight is that one of the aspects that NAFSE provides is to take research that's being published, and for those that are more on the practitioner side and less on the what the heck is this saying side of statistics, we provide the service of you sending us any advancing research or published research that you would like interpreted into what does this mean to me as a land manager. You can send that to me, and I will take all that statistics and all that information and digest it into a 2-page research brief. So if you have anything that you're interested related to research to be digested into this summary brief, you can either submit it to me through an email, scan this QR code, and it's also listed as a question in our post-event survey today. The Big Lebowski's supposed to be stirring his cup, but my GIF animation isn't working. So that is what I have related to just the update and introduction related to NAFSE. If you would like to join our newsletter and keep up to date on our events and offerings, this is the QR code, or you can go to our website and Google NAFSE, and it pops up, and go to sign up for our mailing list. So that's all I have, Bob. I will share that in the chat there is a survey that's being posted. Once you close down the Zoom at the end of today, there will be another survey that pops up. But I inadvertently tried to make it better and inadvertently made it worse. So we prefer you to fill out the survey in the chat. If you fill out the survey that pops up after the Zoom closes down, that's fine too. But please help us improve our programming by filling out one of the two surveys.
Yeah, so if you could click on that now, a separate tab will open up in whatever browser you're using, and you could just leave that window off to the side while we wrap up here. And thanks, Polly. That was great. I think some people wonder, in a way, like, what is the connection with Forest Stewards Guild and fire science? And is that more of a connection in the Northeast, or is that continue through the Midwest? I've been a member of Forest Stewards Guild in both the Midwest and Northeast, and we're doing more with fire and things in the Northeast, it seems to me, but maybe you could answer that.
Sure. The Forest Stewards Guild is a national nonprofit focused on the sustainable use of forest, recognizing that there's the utilitarian and always will be the utilitarian use of forests for human benefit, whether it's recreation or the development of forest products. And the Guild is a national nonprofit. We don't own any land per se, but we are a facilitative organization helping to connect sustainable forestry on the ground management through our programming. So we are always taking on and expanding our programming, and with the work that's being done in the Northeast, we're looking to expand in a greater capacity of putting fire on the ground in the Northeast. And with that being said, there is other programs in the Southeast as well that are related to the Joint Fire Science Exchange that the Guild also supports as well in different programming. So there's a lot of different programs the Guild offers, including forestry for the birds. I know that there's a program up in Maine and one in the Midwest and one in the Northwest Oregon and Washington area. So there's many different resources on the Forest Stewards Guild website related to sustainable forestry that you can access for free.
Great. That's all for the series of talks, and I'm going to turn it over to Chris Neal for a wrap up and comments. And anyone who wants to start putting in comments or questions in the chat, please go ahead. Chris?
Bob, thanks for moderating, and I just have a whole bunch of thank yous. Thanks to everybody who attended. We still have 90 people on at 4 p.m. I'm just amazed. We started with a high quality talk, and they just went on in the same vein all day long. And I just attribute to everybody who participated and the effort and care you put into presenting and the thought you put into it. I want to give a special shout out to Eric, who helped with the logistics today. That was great. We stayed on time. Speakers stayed on time, but the technology, always has a few little glitches, but it just didn't interfere with what we were trying to do today. But a special shout out to Polly, who handled most of the correspondence with all of you, who did the registrations, and who put together this beautiful sort of outline for agenda for today that I think helped everything go well. So thank you to everybody. That the steering committee for the Grasslands Network it always starts working on these things months and months in advance, but it comes down to a few people to actually pull it off. So thanks to everybody. Thanks to our moderators. And I think I just was smiling all day long, because I just think when we sat out, we had a conference, we got, 50, 60 people together in Woods Hole in 2016 who worked on grasslands, who knew there was a lot of information out there, who knew there was a lot of interest. And we just had this vision that if we could keep talking to each other, we could create what I think we've created. And I think it's just terrific. It's a tribute to the stick-to-itiveness of Karen Lombard and other people who send out the agendas for our monthly meetings and notes without fail. And it's just a tribute to the passion that people have for this ecosystem and all the biodiversity that it contains. And I think, managing, I work on climate, I've worked all over the world. And I feel privileged and excited to be working at home where I live on the systems that are sustaining a substantial portion of the biodiversity. And what I think is a model is that what we're doing with grasslands and what Adrian talked about and what we're doing with these bog restorations in the region is a model for how to treat these biodiversity hotspots, how to develop a community of people who have knowledge, who have care and passion for doing projects and sharing information. So all of those things are part of what we're trying to do, and I think we've come a long way in that, in sustaining and growing this community. There were 146 people on at the peak today, which I find just astounding, and a tribute to the NAFSE for helping us get the word out to everybody. So I don't see a lot of other burning questions. I have a hard stop to go teach a class at a remote Zoom class, another Zoom class at 4:00. So I'm sure some people will stay on, but I just want to give my heartfelt thanks to everybody for their talks, their interest in listening and keeping this conversation going. So thanks, everybody.
I think we'd be remiss not to recognize Chris for all his contributions. It's been Chris and Karen who've really carried the torch here and started all of this. So he may be the end speaker, but he was one of the igniters of the Sandplain Grassland Network. Chris,
so check out I had a couple things that I realized that we should get up on the Sandplain Grassland Network. If you just Google Sandplain Grassland Network, it comes up. Woodwell hosts this website. We just sort of redid it. It always needs refreshing and new information, as Adrian was describing. We want to sort of keep it an active to help facilitate an active conversation amongst us. So feel free to get our information, contact us. And part of the purpose of today was to make contacts amongst everybody else. So if you saw somebody give a talk that was interesting, by all means, we're here because we're interested in being part of a larger network of people working on grasslands and sharing information. And let's go and get, the regal fritillaries spread across the Northeast. That was an absolutely inspiring talk. And I'm now gung-ho to figure out, where can that happen? All right. So thanks, everybody. I'm going to sign off.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for attending.
You all.
Thank you.